Um, okay, tonight we've got Tom Daly, and he's going to speak to us on the landscape of cybersex. So I'll hand it over to him now. So thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Kevin, and thanks, folks, for joining. Let me just bring up my slides and make sure that everybody can follow along. So let me see. So, and I'm going to just hide all you good-looking folks, and I'm going to go to. Sorry, no, that's wrong. I'm going to try that again. Play from start. There we go. So, all right. The background to this is some time ago, I did a couple of AI talks, and touching on that was how AI is actually going to affect many parts of us, and how technology was affecting many parts of us. And in many ways, this talk actually comes out of that. I sort of tried to get away from doing it because it's not that easy. But I woke up a little while ago. Well, and then of course we're doing it via Zoom, right? I was planning on being away this year. Although I think the biggest joke sale of item of 2019 was a 2020 day planner. And for none of us, the plans have worked out as we'd planned them. But now as we're doing it via Zoom, I was still reluctant. But I think that this is an important topic that we're not talking about. And I hope, if nothing else, you take that away at the end of the evening. And hopefully we can have something in these slides and in this talk that is a resource that's potentially something you can share and maybe as a conversation starter. So it's the way the world is. And these challenges are not distant. If you have kids or grandkids, the challenges aren't distant. If you're if you're in a church, you're with people where the challenges aren't distant. If you're with people with who are looking for new dating lives, the challenges aren't distant, and in so many ways. So the goal here, really, as I'm alluding to, is to shine some light on areas of life that are actually even sometimes extremely dark and with some bad consequences. And bad consequences, it turns out, for the normal folks, which is those vulnerable. And just to raise awareness of how we're allowing technology to shape us and to form ourselves and our societies. And really, it's a shout out to our culture, our youth and our churches. But I'm really coming from both a secular and a point of view of faith. And there is so much commonality, and we should have so much common cause here between secular, anti-theist, and person of faith. There should be a lot of commonality and a lot of common cause. And I wanted to provide some links and just some initial evidence and research to the pressing nature of this discussion, as well as, I say, to overcome the yuck factor. You know, it's just hard to talk about. And one of my friends who works with the Australian Federal Police combating child sexual abuse, he said, yeah, it's that yuck factor. It's the lack of conversations that actually lets this go further and further undetected, this whole area, or unconsidered. So here's our agenda, and I'll get on with it. Just a definition, a broad look at the landscape. I don't suggest that this is a complete look. And even this evening, talking with some friends, I realise there are things that I've overlooked and haven't included. But then we want to have a detailed look at a few of the aspects. And then there's just one or two things to say about cybersex landscape in the church, and then just some summary and conclusions. So what is it? Well, here's the Wikipedia definition. Basically computer sex, internet sex, whatever, virtual sex. but I think we need to look at it more broadly. So I've added additionally my words, any computer technology application or service that directly enables, influences, or affects human sexual activity and incredibly importantly, and our relationships. So here's sort of what I came up with as a bit of a landscape, just as a sort of a bit of a map. And you know, from the dating apps through, it turns out that, you know, there's a whole lot of associated cheating apps. And then as we got high-speed internet, porn became really available. Then you get topics such as revenge porn and animated porn. But then you add AI and further technology into that mix. You get things like deep fakes, and we'll talk about those. And then once you've got deep fakes and you can start generating your own porn, then you can start using it for revenge. And then, you know, is it possible? Consider the question of whether we can just generate completely generated porn like you can with animated. And then keeping going with the technology, with adding technology, add virtual reality and 3D and then augmentation. So we're talking everything from role-playing games to headsets, and then to AI connected sex robots. Can I just have a shout out? If you're not on mute, could I just ask you to mute, or maybe Kevin, you could mute everybody just for the users of the video later? Thanks, guys. And then there's what I started to realize and consider a whole heap of other technologies. Oh, sorry, I missed out sexting, and we'll talk about that. But these dual use technologies, things like Bitcoin and blockchain, which you can, you know, use to invest, or you can use to hide child or enable child porn. Our financial systems, which are monitored with AUSTRAC, and we'll talk about that, or encryption, so that you can keep your private details private, yet they enable all sorts of nefarious uses for child sexual exploitation. And the social media platforms aren't completely benign here either. You might not immediately see the relevance to the topic, but I hope that will become clear as we talk. And then all the way through to what I think is really the pinnacle of the pyramid, or the triangle, is just so much of the normalization of violence, particularly against women, but not only, because it's certainly against children. That's OSEC. We'll talk about that, which is live streamed child abuse, and then recorded or stored child exploitation material. And then through to the topics you'd be aware of: sex slavery, sex trafficking, grooming. So let's dig into some of these, trying to sort of start at the least influential and heading towards the more dire, or the more exploitory, or the more damaging. So dating apps, very, very common. You know, whether you're my age and single, or my age and broken up and looking for somebody, you know, dating apps are basically now something that our culture and people just do, particularly younger folks. That's how they meet. And they do have some interesting side effects by the fact that they're technology and they're online. They're sort of changing who we meet and how we meet, because you can select, you can have a lot more criteria, and there's other things that all my mates who are on the dating apps talk about. This idea of upgrading. So you might have had coffee with somebody or met them, been out, had sort of first date, and then you find that they're going to meet you again, and continually they never they never follow through with the second one, and you might not get a message back, or they stop messaging. And it's the term called upgrading. You're being upgraded because it was a better photo, and that's because of the pace of people you can meet and message with, and actually just come into contact with. So it's this increased pace is an interesting aspect. And I'm not making any comments. In fact, tonight, I'm not going to make too many moral comments. That's a different talk. I'm just trying to show the harm that is actually happening. Now, I know there's a moral component to that, and I will make some moral comments. But even right here, I'm just making comments about the way things are and the way things are changing us, or technology has changed something. And even here, there's a couple of things to note about the ad and this that I just got basically from a search engine. They say that they relies on behavioral matching technology, and yet everything is swipe left or swipe right. It's all totally on pictures. And this is big business. This is big business. In my day, you met somebody at a dance or a disco or a bar or wherever, a sport club, and I'm not sure there was big business in that, but dating apps are big business, and I think the claims to use AI are both intriguing and possibly mostly false. But here I Googled, or I used DuckDuckGo as a search engine, Christian dating sites. But have a look at this Christian dating site. It's a Christian dating site. Excellent. Terrific. And it's featured Christian, but it's alongside of gay, lesbian, senior, and other. That's different as well. But dating apps are really, really widely used. Their use is growing. And you can see just from the 2016, from a survey from Barna, which is a research and stats, and this is a church. This is a church affiliate. Well, they're not affiliated, but they're an organisation who profess faith in Jesus Christ, and you can see their figures of Gen Xers and millennials. Certainly this is widely used technology. Evangelicals there. A lot of the young folks I know in our church use dating apps. But there's also another thing that I discovered, and I was probably being naive. There's also, I actually went looking for Ashley Madison because we know that there are adultery sites, and this introduces a few things. It's one thing to, I think, again, going back years ago, meet somebody in the office, have a moment of failure or whatever, or meet somebody somewhere. I think technology is allowing you to go, okay, I'm going to actively seek out somebody. But it's more than that. It's not just the existence of somebody creating a site where you can hook up to commit adultery or to cheat on your partner. There's all these apps. This nosy trap, what it does is you have your phone, and to finish the sentence, nosy trap is a good example. The first one on the list there. What it does is to actually have your iPhone, and it puts an image of your login screen up. And when somebody, for instance, your partner, your wife, your husband, gets your phone and keys in the password, which they know, it actually captures their photo quietly, and it just sort of blips, and then it's already hidden all the images and all the text messages you might have been saving with the person that you're cheating with. But what it's done is it's let you know that you're being spied upon. And somebody sat down and actually written that app and a whole heap like it. Private photo appears as a calculator, but it hides your images, probably your sexting images and your private messages. So it looks like a calculator, so it tries to obfuscate. And there's a dozen different apps, cheating apps to actually help you commit adultery or to cheat on your partner. And I'm not sure I'm not sure this is a great statement on trust within relationships. But again, I'm going to reality here. I'm not going to, at the moment, I'll just leave it at that. And that's the reality. Something else that's extremely common, you couldn't do, 20 or 30 years ago, is sexting. That's sending sexually explicit photos of yourself to somebody that you may know, or asking for sexually explicit photos of somebody you might know. But according, and this is BANA, so this is the research organisation in the US. They claim that 62%, and I think they had 5,000 people in their survey. 62% of teens and young adults say they received a nude image from a boyfriend or girlfriend, and 40% have sent nude images, again, usually to a boyfriend or girlfriend. And even just recently, a good friend of mine in the US who's very, very close to his boys, go to church each week, kids are in youth group. And when his kid was found out, he said, come on, Dad, we all do it. And the father was horrified, but we shouldn't be horrified, because this is increasingly normal or increasingly usual. And in BANA, they actually talked about the sexting crisis. One of the things that sexting is actually able to do is it's able to objectify the person. It's sort of able to make pornography personal. And it invites us to disembody and therefore detach ourselves from our relationship, to objectify somebody who we otherwise might be going out with. Now, one of the things that happens here with the dating apps and the hookup apps is that you have a hookup, you have that period of adrenaline, and then, of course, there's a period of disappointment afterwards. And that leads to the next issue, which is sex extortion. So now you've been dumped, right? You've hooked up with somebody on a hookup site, you've shared intimate photos, and now something's gone wrong. And it's very often to actually see two things: either posting of those intimate nude photos to media platforms, or to actually have extortion going on, or even third parties to have extortion going on, to exploit the fact that photos have been shared. And Australia has an e-safety officer, a Department of Online Safety, and this is an article from the ABC News talking about the sextortion scams that are surging, particularly during lockdown. So again, this is technology changing the way and the things that we can actually do around our sexual relationships. So then moving on to high-speed internet porn. The high-speed part of this is really critical. I've had an internet connection from back to about 1985, I think, long before there was a World Wide Web, and high-speed internet porn only became available with things like broadband. And you can see here, the speeds increasing historically, and then you can see how long it may take to download a movie. And in the early days of this, where high-speed internet porn was becoming available, I started hearing about effects on particularly young teen boys' brains because MRIs were becoming available at that stage too. And then about 2007, with smartphones and streaming, the high-speed porn availability became immersive. You could not only download one movie and watch it, but you could now watch many streams and look through many categories and be watching more and more different things at the same time. And we put this into the pockets of teenagers back around 2010, 2011. And many of the problems with that are well documented. I'm not going to go in here. I'm just going to assume them. But I do want to tell you some things you probably don't realize. And by the way, in the last few weeks where I've been researching this, not a pleasant job, I might add, I have been surprised by many things. Those cheating apps and the sophistication of them was one of them. The extent of the sexting is another. And the sextortion, I was surprised at the extent of that. And in these slides, in this presentation, I'm trying to leave you enough links so that you can go and use the presentation, these slides, which I'm sure Kevin will post, as a way of looking at this and even verifying what I'm saying, if you like. But anyway, if you look at just one site in the US, Pornhub, 42 billion visits. They publish all what we call in the IT business, the analytics, all of the details and the data, the speeds and the feeds and the visits and the time on site, and all of the things that somebody providing content would want to know. And anybody investing in the company might want to know. So Pornhub do this unashamedly for every year. And in 2019, they had 42 billion visits. 42 billion people went to pornhub.com or some content on their site. This is just one internet porn provider. 136 million hours of new content. That means new performers, new content, new act, and Australia, being a very rich country, is about 9th in the consumer list of this porn. A teen is and has been long one of the most searched for categories, and the porn industry actually got away from having to record any birth dates or any ages of their actors or actresses a number of years ago. So how many of those teens are actually even teens? Anyway, they claim there's about a 3% increase of females, but many places I read that there are at least 30% of young, like that's millennial and Gen X's, females using the site. And 76% of the traffic comes from mobile phones. Yeah, we're talking a $97 billion industry here. Maybe this is one of the reasons we don't hear much, right? We think about the tobacco industry and how they fought to protect their profits. This is $97 billion. Just to give you an idea, Australia's GDP in 2019 was about 1.4 trillion, only about 14 times more than this one porn site in the US. I'll let that sink in a little bit. And you can go and grab these things from the links that I've said, or you can go to pornhub.com analytics. Just Google pornhub.com analytics and you'll find their figures. But here's an interesting thing. If you have kids or grandkids, young folks with gaming consoles, they have figures about how much of their traffic comes to Pornhub, this one site, from game consoles. So things like PlayStations and Nintendo. Just something to think about, and maybe to cast your eye about if you've got game consoles in the home. And I don't know I know how many young kids are playing Fortnite, but there's a whole genre of Fortnite porn on Pornhub that they brag about and they advertise. So I don't quite know the implications of that. But we will touch on something like that a little bit. We'll come back to that a little bit later. And again, continuing the idea of pervasiveness, you can see the growth here from 23 billion in 2016, and I could have kept going back all the way through to 42 billion now. And during COVID lockdown, it's spiraling. It's much more than 42 billion for 2020, I think already. Just to put this in perspective, in 2018, they said it's like the populations of Canada, Poland, and Australia visiting this porn site every day in 2019. Just think of the pervasiveness here, right? So look around the gallery. I'm sorry, guys. Look around the gallery, look around your church, look around the shopping center. People are using porn. Now, lest you think I'm being a moralist or a church person who just wants to take away your freedoms, here's skeptic.com, a US Skeptic Society. Here's an article, not atypical on their website, how porn is messing with your manhood. And in this article, which you can go and access via that link, they talk about lowered libido. They talk about erectile dysfunction, but I have to tell you, I've checked the medical research, and I put a question mark there. That definitely seems that some people have been affected by porn, but look, the evidence wasn't clear, and it seems to be a point of contention. So I just put it to let you know that it's from the article. Addiction is real, and the way that addiction works is that high-speed internet porn actually releases dopamine. It's the same dopamine receptors as cocaine or alcohol or tobacco. So you're getting a fix when you're actually watching high-speed internet porn for pleasure. And definitely altered sexual tastes and lessened pleasure. Again, you need, with an addictive substance, you need more of it to get the same level of pleasure. And we'll see that happening with categories of porn and VR porn as we continue. But from this secular article, in undergraduate college males, depression, anxiety, stress, social functioning was significantly related to online porn use, and the more viewing was related to greater problems. So this is skeptical. This is something that we can agree about, I think. It's non-controversial. From the ABC, they actually had a good article. I don't have the link here, but you can read it from the slides there, or just Google ABC porn problem. And, 90% of males and 60% of girls have seen online porn within Australia. And 88% of the most popular porn categories includes physical aggressions. And you'll see that. I didn't post this stuff from the Pornhub analytics because it had graphic descriptions and stuff like that. And I was trying to keep this accessible to everybody. But that certainly, that number certainly correlates with what Pornhub, this one site, actually claims. And the porn producers overseas made a conscious effort to make the content increasingly violent. And things that were soft porn once, things that were hardcore once are now softcore. And things are being much more normalized, including, and you can read about the number of girls that are actually having emergency surgeries, and particularly when they're imitating what's happening in the porn. And I will leave that to your imaginations, but it's probably worse than what you're thinking. And this is from surgeons. I just don't have, there's not enough slide room to put everything in. But here's one of the things. Here's one of the commentators, the medical commentators from this ABC article. These aren't girls who have been plucked off the street and raped, nor cornered at parties by drunken boys, although that happens, of course. These acts are happening in bedrooms across the country where the portability of the internet has enabled kids and adults like Steve, who's featured in this article, to load a porn video on their phone and say to their partner, hey, do this. And I need to just alert you to the categories. Categories are a really big deal. Categories getting more and more violent, more and more hardcore. And so I used DuckDuckGo to actually Google rape porn. The pages, the list went on and on and on for multiple sites. You can see this, right? 100% free rape porn videos, right? And so then I thought, in light of all of the heightened understanding about injustices right at the moment, particularly to do with race, I thought, well, okay, let me look at black rape. And of course, it's not surprising to find that that is its own category. Watch free black girl rape, force, rough, ebony rape. This is the world we're living in. This is the industry that is $97 billion or more. And so here's a good question that was raised during the week from fightthenewdrug.org, which is a secular site trying to get people to struggle against porn use. Why does the porn get a free pass on racial violence? I haven't seen anything in the news except for Fight the New Drug about what the porn industry is doing to black girls and black men. And we've been so far looking at the viewers, porn harm on the viewers. Now let's swap. What about the harm to the providers? Here's an interesting example, and they had links on FTND, Fight the New Drug. I've got the link down there. My assault put me in mental prison, but Pornhub gave me a life sentence when millions watched the videos of my assault. And sometimes they get taken down and then they end up on the dark web, and then they end up back on mainstream media, such as Pornhub or even sometimes social media. And many times rape gets uploaded as porn to be consumed for pleasure. I'm just going to let you think about that. Let you think about that. What sort of is happening that rape gets uploaded to be consumed as pleasure? And if you don't think it happens, just look at what I just Googled for you or what I searched for you on the previous slide. E-safety, Australia's e-safety officer. It means in Australia, Australia's regulations don't curtail violent or objectionable porn being watched locally. They simply stop it being hosted here. And there are multiple proven links between porn and the sex trafficking industry, and drugs and depression and suicide are common. I didn't have time to put in the proofs or the evidence for that here, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Revenge porn is something, again, that couldn't happen 20 or 30 years ago. And again, you have your Tinder date, you have your hookup, you do your sexting, or you make you use your phone to make some pictures of yourself or whatever, or you with somebody else, you with a previous ex. It gets off your phone. Once it's recorded. And one of the things that's happening now is increasingly people are posting revenge porn. You know, normally it's nude photos and nude poses and whatever and more, that's been meant for personal and private pleasure, but then it becomes revenge porn after a relationship sours. And here's where we are with this. Not only are the revenge porns a complete category on Pornhub and on the dark web, right? And again, here's the search for it. But also, it occurs on social media. And so a number of years ago, Facebook said, look, the best we can do is if you send us your naked photos, you send them to us so that way we'll be able to match them and keep them off of Facebook publicly. So you've got to go and shame yourself to Facebook before they can help you not shame yourself to everybody else. They're trialing new tools, and Facebook promises new AI tool will proactively detect revenge porn. But so far, so far the effects are debatable, apparently. And then on the dark web, revenge porn it appears rife. Again, continuing the idea of what's this doing to us and our cultural trends. Here's again some more findings in the US context from 2016 from Barna. The one I just draw your attention to, just for the sake of time, is that teens and young adults rank not recycling rubbish as more immoral than viewing porn. Young folks, millennials, iGen, basically think it's worse. It's a worse moral crime to not recycle than it is to view porn. And you can look at that research, and you can look at the you can look at some of their research, including, although I would actually say there is a difference between there is less porn use between practicing Christians, but every now and then Christians, there's really not much difference between them and the normal viewing public. So now that's AI and porn. So this is 2D, and this is that's 2D so far, and that's just using cameras and computers and communication lines. Now let's throw AI into the mix. What does that do? Well, AI lets us now create something called deep fakes. So deep fakes enables you to take an image of somebody and actually make them say and do things in different contexts. I'll just give you a quick example of that. So here, and here you'll see here's President Obama.
And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss, the grief felt by the people of Orlando.
That's that second one. That second one of Obama, and I'm not going to play too much of it, but just to try and give you the idea, is actually it's fake. They've actually put fake lip movements and fake speech to Obama, and deep fakes are going to become a problem for law enforcement. They're already a problem for media because they're becoming increasingly hard to tell from the real thing. So did Obama really say that, or was it a deep fake? So now take that concept and look at the comment that I've got below. Scarlett Johansson has been superimposed into dozens of graphic sex scenes over the past year that have circulated across the web. So they've taken Scarlett Johansson's face and her voice, and it's been superimposed over the porn from Pornhub or from wherever. And then that's been described as leaked, look, this is Scarlett Johansson, but it's not. It's a fake video that's been made up by somebody for their own gratification, and Scarlett Johansson's nowhere near it. Just like Obama is being made to say things there that he never said. Scarlett Johansson is being made to do things she's never done. And this is an increasing genre of porn. And even better, it's and I say that sarcastically and sadly, revenge porn. Now, what you do is you take that image, that sexted image from your ex, and you put their image now in the revenge porn that you want to create, and you leak that out onto the dark web or onto Pornhub somewhere, and now they are in their own porn video, and you've gotten some sort of very sick revenge on hurting somebody deeply and if you believe, as I do, that sexuality goes to the core of our being, I think you've hurt the individual to a great degree, and AI can help you do that, and it's very common. And in fact, if you read the comment on the right-hand side, deepfake algorithms are open source. That means they're free and available for anybody to use. They're easily accessible to anybody with basic programming skills and a reliable internet connection. And there's lots of them. Under there's the search that I did, lots of deepfake apps, they run on your phone. Here's an example. I Googled Bonds, I Googled Bonds swimwear or something, and I got a photo of this lady. I uploaded her to deepnudenow.com. 5 minutes later, same lady, fully naked. Couldn't tell that she'd ever had clothes on. And you can get those sorts of apps for your phone very commonly. If you have kids or grandkids, be worth passing your eye over their phone just to see if they've got any deep fake software on there. And the deep fake law changes from place to place. And it might be even that it's really hard to make them illegal. I don't really have time to go into all of that, but it's a real problem. And technology is, again, enabling a revenge in the way that revenge was never, ever possible before. I also asked the question, is it possible to completely generate porn and completely generate faces, bodies, motion? And the number of sites that I went to claim that this image, this lady on the left, doesn't exist. There's a subreddit group, for those who are familiar with Reddit, that actually talks about this person does not exist. They claim that this is completely and utterly AI-generated image. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced. But what the author has done is he's created an article that talks about how to generate AI porn. And he said he's concluded the effort is not yet commercially viable. So happily, we don't have completely AI generated porn right at the moment. It's only at the deep fake level, not completely AI generated. Of course, we have animated, but at least that's not completely human-like, right? So now let's go one step further and let's make the assault on our senses and on the performers and on reality even more immersive and more real. And we talk about virtual reality and augmented reality. What does that mean? That means 3D reality goggles and devices. It means connected devices and connected experience. And with a 3D immersive experience, you're there, you're in the room, you're actually starring in the movie. I looked at this in the form of fly-throughs, and I don't have any VR goggles or whatever. But I can tell you what was once a high-end technology is now essentially consumer. Here's all the best headset reviews for 2020. And these headsets are used for gaming, for real estate fly-throughs. I saw one great example of having a surf experience in the middle of Alice Springs, in the middle of the desert. They had a shop with all these VR headsets. But it's so real when you add porn and the porn experience in there, including connected devices. And again, I'm going to ask you to use your imagination here because I couldn't figure out a good way to not make this talk more gross than what it already is. But the devices are connected and all sorts of sensory input. And here's an article which really describes, if you click on this link, this Mashable link on the bottom left here, you'll get a review, a young man actually going through the experience of wearing the headset and being in, essentially what it comes down to is using the headset, starring in his own porn movie and feeling like he's really there. And of course, this is a complete genre. So you can get 3D rape of black people and kids on Pornhub. And so it's a completely immersive experience of abusing somebody violently. In my AI talk, we talked about sex robots, and that was 2 years ago, believe it or not. In that time, I'd just say they've become increasingly sophisticated and increasingly AI enabled with human responses, verbal responses largely, ones with heartbeats, and they're more and more connected to networks and devices, just all over, more and more sophisticated. Robot and AI bordellos are springing up around the place. And I'll leave you to read the article there that robots you can actually make love to today. I would debate the word love, but you know, you get the idea. And then child sex dolls haven't gone away. And back in January, I note that somebody in South Australia was locked up for actually trying to import them into Australia. But you know what? There's many countries that, well, there's a number of countries that still produce them. They're getting more lifelike, or I should say more childlike, more realistic. And they're only illegal in some countries. So they are actually increasing sophistication. And then I was surprised with the whole issue of virtual reality games. You know, is it adultery if in a virtual reality world you cheat on your partner? Is that cheating? And I was sort of interested in that question, but I really didn't have time to investigate it. But what I did find out in a very popular modern game, World of Warcraft, there was a village called Goldshire, where it's all about you know, bondage and rape and BDSM and it's essentially in the middle of a game that many of our kids play. It was there. I think I read something that it's not there now. And to be clear, this village is hosted by some servers, but it's the participants that actually do the role playing and do the sexual activities, the online sexual activities. This is so we've been going through increasing technology, increasing sophistication to the user, and increasing levels of damage to the participants, and we get what I think we're now starting to get, you know, the much more dire uses of the technology with child abuse and child exploitation material. So OSEC is online sexual exploitation of children, and child exploitation material is recorded stuff. OSEC, it is when there is somebody viewing via live stream some child being abused, and by abuse I mean physically, by a third party. So this is sort of like having an agent for your online sexual gratification with children. So the children are actually abused live on camera. And for a person typically in the rich West, and that person in the rich West might well be directing the abuse, saying, do this, do that, etc. And then once that OSEC is, and that's live streamed, and it can be apparently live streamed on sites like Facebook. And then once it's recorded, it becomes child exploitation material. The trafficker is the person who's offering the money and or doing the abuse on behalf of the other person. It's the person doing the exploiting. The customer is the, the customer is the person who pays the money. They're typically in the Western world. And then there's a lot of this crime comes to light because of the cyber tip line reports in the US, where they'll actually see or come across the digital content. And back May 25th is the last time International Justice Mission, which is a Christian organisation. It's the largest global anti-slavery organisation. And it is growing. Along with everything else in the cybersex landscape that I've showed you, it is growing. I'm taking my facts here from an International Justice Mission summary report that they just released this month or late last month, and I have a link to it on the left. It makes very sad and disturbing reading. I encourage everybody to read it, to be aware of what's going on with vulnerable children from the rich Western world, enabled by technology. And look from 2014 to 2017, you'll see the steep rise. All of us are familiar with curves, right? This is one we not only need to flatten, we need to eliminate, but it's not. It's going the other way. You can see this is rising exponentially. Let's talk about the victim. Who are the victims here? Well, this report is about Philippines. And the Philippines is well connected, lots of English So they're one of the first places to be exploited by online sexual exploitation of children, online live streaming, and and uh, and you can see that the median age, the most common age, is 11 years old. When I presented on objective morality last year, I gave the case of a $150 US bought, I think it was an 11-year-old and a 5-year-old to be abused for the pleasure of the viewer. But you'll see, we're talking about 0 to 3-year-olds. Sorry, 0 to 3. 0 to 3. In the ages of 0 to 3, 9%. Increasingly, tragically, or incredibly tragically, the traffickers, or at least the providers, are biological parents or other relatives, making the children available for this crime. Let's look at the demand and supply. Look at the graph. See, you see the V in the middle of this graph? That's the Philippines. That's where the kids are being abused. And the lines all show to Europe, to the US, to Australia, to New Zealand, to the rich West. You know, the demand is in the rich West and the supply is in developing countries. And you can read here about the types, but you'll see here, the types of customer, the types of perpetrator, and you'll see that 18% of them come from Australia. And you know how the West often holds up Sweden as, it's just a model of Enlightenment values. 25% of their use and abuse of, 25% of the abuse of the Philippines children speaks that that's an overly simplistic attitude. And English was the communication language, and and most of it is not being done on the dark web. It's being done on the surface of the internet. And there was generally a financial motivation. How is it detected? Once it's stored, or if the images are stored, then there's a number of ways. The cyber trip lines that I mentioned in my definitions, but there's also a great project called Project Arachnid out of the Canadian Society for the Protection of Children, and it's a web crawler. Basically goes from website to website to website, inspecting links and images and videos, and 100K images. This is recent data I've got from their website. 100K of images per month are highlighted for human inspections, and that's growing markedly. The other things you've got to do is detect live stream, which is potentially not stored. But a really big way of detection and prevention is detect payments. And I'll leave prosecution aside for the moment because we don't have time. But once the content is available, re-victimization of these kids, it can be impossible to remove the content. It goes into the dark web, it then resurfaces. That's very common. The lives shattered, the damage is profound. The families, when it's families offering up the kids as well, that's even more profound, the damage and the devastation. And there is such a huge need to care for these shattered kids. So we'll move on just to touch on the dual use technologies, social media, and I'm going to wind up here in just a minute. Social media is being used for trafficking, organising, and doing the organisation of the trafficking, both the porn, in the sex trafficking industry, in the OSEC. It's used for grooming. We know that. That is something we're a little bit more aware of, I think, particularly since what happened down at in Horseshoe Bay and here in South Australia, where a young lady was lured to her death a number of years ago. And then, of course, live stream abuse is apparently happening on the media platforms. financial technology that we use to pay for something on Amazon.com also enables receipt and payment for OSEC. Bitcoin and blockchain can hide OSEC, and in fact have been known to hide OSEC and CEM, child exploitation material. And you know, the DOJ, the Department of Justice in the US, he's just an example, just to show you that that Bitcoin was being used to fund a darknet child porn site. So it's happening quite commonly, and again, it's growing from everything you read. And encryption, that thing that enables us to actually log into our banks and keep our mortgage payments between us and the bank, or our bank balance. It also hampers and even prevents the detection of child exploitation material in OSEC. It hampers the collection of evidence. And there's a big discussion here about encryption and privacy, a protection of the vulnerable, but also protection of our private stuff. There's a real conversation to have here. And Austrac, which you may have seen Westpac in the news, and Westpac, this is what they've admitted to. They've been accused, I believe, of a lot more of this. If you look down in the right-hand corner, this is from the Guardian paper. That Westpac has admitted to breaking the law by failing to monitor whether a dozen customers were making transactions consistent with child exploitation. And eventually Austrac, which is the Australian government for monitoring and detecting fraud and crime in our financial system, they eventually came and have charged Westpac with a number of, well, you know, 23 million breaches. So here's my observation. Here's my claim. I haven't proved it beyond doubt in this slide set and in this presentation. I'm just trying to raise your awareness of it. I think we are increasingly proving it, that the more and more we're letting a cybersex landscape dictate our norms, our behaviors, the more and more we actually indulge in its pleasures unthinkingly, the more and more victims there are, and the amount of harm we're doing actually increases. It is true, every time, well, I'll get to that. The summary is we are being changed. Here's some articles just from Time and linked to Time, from Time. Porn has terrible effects on what young women believe they are supposed to look like, particularly during sex. The amount of surgery that is going up for young girls so that they can look like porn performers is going very rapidly. And there's National Institute of Health and other medical articles that I haven't included to prove that, but I certainly have proved it to my satisfaction, and you will too if you look. And from this same article, there is some indication that porn has a liberalizing effect. Heterosexual male users are more likely than their peers to approve of homosexual marriage. On the other hand, they're less likely to support affirmative action for women, i.e. they're more likely to actually normalize violence against women. And on the bottom left here, you know, why porn is an escalating behavior, and that goes to the dopamine receptors, and it goes to the more and more immersive behavior we're creating with AI and VR, and the genres, the increasing genres that we're creating of porn. Challenges for the church. We're almost there, guys. Bear with me for like another minute or two. I heard, ironically, pulling up to Reasonable Faith about 18 months ago for somebody's talk. I was listening to a podcast, and it was an Orthodox priest claiming that most of the confessions I hear these days are for sins not possible 20 years ago. What does that tell you? Orthodox churches, we've learned from Chris Tabalides, they have confession before they have communion. That means this is people in the Orthodox church, teen boys, teen girls, married, single pastors, elders and leadership team. This is not discriminatory. think of the pervasiveness that I showed you. This is happening everywhere. But the difficulties for the church are even harder, I think, or at least I observe. Porn and cybersex are hard to talk about for the church because it's unpleasant. Porn industry and media successfully paint porn as normal and freeing. I take you back to that Barna. That Barna said that the kids think that it's worse to not recycle your rubbish than it is to actually look at porn. The pervasiveness of and biological pull of porn, along with virtual reality, mean many Christians struggle with porn and therefore also feel we know that it's wrong. We feel that we feel a great deal of shame. Now, I'll tell you here, I have actually always struggled against it, but not for decades. Not for decades. Because I said to you, I had the internet very early. Because I realized that every time I clicked on a link, I was doing harm. And that sense of shame is palpable. Well, if you're a young person with active hormones and you have a porn problem, which you most likely do, look at the figures that I'm showing you, look at all the increases. Is it easier to give up church or to stop using porn? And how actively are the bulk of our churches actually trying to help people engage, particularly our young folks, engage in the struggle? And I've shown you just as an example, sexting with kids is extremely common and growing. I think sometimes for the church and many times, particularly our older pastors, can't be heard on this topic because cybersex is often the elephant in the room and it's making the gospel very hard to hear from us. Ravi Zacharias said whenever he got, they got to the end of the evening and it might be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and there'd be 3 or 4 people that they were still talking to and talking about faith matters. And they would be increasingly asked, can you help me with my porn addiction and can you stop me from committing suicide? And I'm quoting Ravi Zacharias and RZIM. I just ask you to consider to wrap up. Here's the loop, and here's evidence of the argument that I'm making that the harms are increasing. Every time you click on a site, more money is generated in the form of advertising revenue. Every site looks at every website looks at its analytics to see how many likes, to see how many hits, to see how many people are on their site. And more money is generated, and the following: more content is generated. That means more people are more participants are needed, whether they're willing or not willing. More teen category is searched, whether they're teenagers or below teenagers. More increasingly graphic and hardcore content is needed to satisfy. More people are being objectified. The more violent content, including rape, is produced. The more our girls are requiring surgical repair after imitating porn participants, the more our girls want surgery to imitate porn participants. The more our relationships are all affected, and the more porn is at the pinnacle here, more child porn is created, more children harmed, victimized and re-victimized, all of which adds demand and drives the circle. So if you care about women and girls, if you care about mental health, if you care about child exploitation, if you care about sex trafficking, social justice, if you're in the church trying to reach young people, or if you're trying to then understand increasingly folks in your church are struggling with porn. And you need to likely get more educated and pay more attention to the cybersex landscape and how quickly it's changing and affecting us at all. And the gospel of Jesus Christ really does have unique resources to address all the challenges. We are not going to fight the damages here by just saying, let's just assume and think that porn is free. No, that leads to more and more harm. Here's what you can do. Check out ijm.org and maybe get your church involved in a Freedom Sunday. And if you're not in a church, still check out ijm.org. But there's a whole lot of secular things here as well. Fightthenewdrug.org I'd suggest to you. But here's something that all of us can do, as I did decades ago. we can engage in the struggle, whether it's with our teenagers or our grandkids, our kids, or whether it's us personally. Engage in the struggle. The less you click, failing once a month is better than failing 5 times a week, because you drive less traffic, you damage less people, you contribute less to the harm for yourself and for everybody else. And here's a great resource from Matt Frad, a really good YouTube clip worth watching, where he's actually going to give you resources much better than I just have to try and contribute to the well-being of those vulnerable kids, and to our girls, and to our youth, and to ourselves and our societies. And I'm done. Sorry for going over.
Right. Thank you very much.
Stop sharing, Kevin?
Sorry?
Stop sharing?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. And it's now open for general discussion. And so feel free to unmute your microphone and participate. But while you're speaking, I actually put a few items on chat.
Oh, I didn't see him. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And if I can find it, I just had it open and I closed it. I asked the question, what is the dark web? And Bronwyn kindly answered the question.
Yeah.
But and she said that it's encrypted online content that is not reached by conventional search engines. If it's encrypted, then how do people actually access it?
I'm not an expert in the dark web at all. So if somebody else has got more experience, let me know. But it's done with Tor servers and then passing around keys and sharing keys and things like that, no doubt. And there's a lot of, dark web. You can buy handguns and things like that in the US. And it's called the dark web, not just because it's not on the surface of the web and found with Google and the other search engines, but quite often, for the uses that it's actually put to.
Mm. And just a couple of questions on, is it technically feasible to stop it? Because is it possible to regulate the web? And is it possible to trace the sources of illegal activity? So that's a bigger issue than just porn, like it also applies to fraud as well.
Yes, that Canadian search engine, the Canadian search engine is one example where they use a web crawler. And Google in the early days, and a lot of Lycos and Yahoo, they were web crawlers. They would actually go, they'd find all the links in a page, and then they'd go through all those links, and they'd find the links on that page, and they'd literally crawl the web. If the World Wide Web is a web, the idea was it was a spider crawling through the web. Mm. And so they would actually crawl all of the links in pages, and then they'd go and look at anything that's an image or a video link, and then they will go and, using AI, they will try and detect and match, do pattern matching of certain criteria, certainly metadata. If they have metadata, date, length of time, title, number, any sort of metadata, that's easy. That's going to be fairly straightforward. But my understanding is they're starting to look at some of the content, and they're able to do image matching and things like that for some of these things.
Well, is it a kind of technically feasible for governments to catch the crooks?
Oh, well, you saw what IJM is doing. In fact, IJM is 381. What was the number there? The 381 from this survey. Give me one sec to go back to their numbers. And the answer is yes. They've freed 381 victims between 2001 and 2017 from online sexual exploitation, right? So there's 381 victims. Now, not all of those victims had a trafficker and a perpetrator. Sometimes they say that they actually released the kids and they didn't find the perpetrator. So yes, it's possible to find them. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, there were people locked up here in South Australia.
They were. Yeah, that
Yeah.
the Australian Federal Police, with a cooperation with I think it might have been America, or anyway, the Philippines. They rescued 14 children. There was an article in last weekend's, I think it was the Sunday Mail. Yeah, so they did catch some, and they were parents who were selling their children and for the video sexual exploitation.
Yeah.
And in fact, some Australian men had gone over there to abuse the kids as well.
Yeah.
It's just interesting because I actually wrote up on the Facebook page on the Australian Federal Police Facebook page how proud I was that they were doing this really, really tough job, and keep doing it. And oh my God, yeah, it's just really scary.
Good on you. And they need more support. And in fact, part of the reason I'm doing the talk tonight was after the AI talk, and just before my AI talk last year. Do you remember I had the video of the kids, Super Mario?
Yeah.
I had the video of Super Mario of the kids actually that were rescued, and IJM made a promotional video. And before that, my mate who's actually working with the AFP task force, so he's heading it up in one of the states, and he called me, and I thought he was calling me to talk about fishing or beer or something like that because he's a mate of mine, and he called me to thank me for all the stuff that I was posting on Facebook from fighting the new drug traditionally on porn and the IJM stuff. He's saying because nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
He said, and that just makes our life so much harder because it's not a dinner time conversation. There's no awareness, and in fact, quite often there's a desire for ignorance. We'd rather, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. Certainly uncomfortable for our pastors thinking about how many people here might have a problem. That's really not even nice to admit, right? But it's hard. It's hard.
Just the skimming over the surface that you did tonight was unpleasant.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to know the most intriguing thing? I've done all of that, and apart from the woman whose bathing suit that I actually removed, I didn't see any porn. I used DuckDuckGo, Brian, and it wasn't. And I even had the settings not on strict. Now, I didn't click on any of those links that I'm showing you, which is why I screen grabbed them and put them in, because I wasn't going to click on them, right, on the Pornhub video. But that analytics, you don't have to watch porn to get their analytics. That's for the business people. Isn't that intriguing? And yet, we know that 8-year-olds are seeing porn on the devices. So how is it when I'm actually looking for how is it that when I'm looking to research this topic, I don't actually view any porn, and yet our kids are seeing it at 8 years old? I didn't include that, but take that. Our kids are, I'm reading, and you might be really interested in this, Bronwyn. I've just finished reading So the Next Generation Will Win from Sean McDowell and Jay Warner Wallace.
Yeah.
And it's really how to try and deal with iGen or Gen X, Gen Z and millennials and be able to communicate the gospel with them. And of course, this is a significant part of what they address in their book. And they have some figures. They've done research with a number of organizations. And yeah, they actually address how young and how much the kids are actually seeing.
Tom, a couple of times in your video, you said that the increase in porn causes resistance to the gospel. Like, why is that?
The increasing numbers and the increasing normalization. Because if you are doing something like Matt Fradd is the link that I had in the last slide there. Really recommend you watch his video. It's much better than, much more engaging than mine. But he only talks about porn. I was trying to talk about tech. But he said So have you ever known anybody that looks at porn and goes, "Hey, wow, that was a great experience"? No, particularly if you're a young person in church, you feel awful afterwards because you know there's something wrong. You've at least objectified somebody, and you know you've been taught in church that that's wrong. So the level of shame, you're bearing a level of shame. And so what's easier to do? Is it easier to normalize that behavior and not be ashamed of it, try to shed the shame that way, right? And that means that you give up church. Oh, yeah, I hear about that part of the gospel, but the pastor, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't get it. Been too long since he's a lad. He didn't even have an iPhone growing up. It's much easier to take away any credibility from the leadership than it is to give away your porn problem. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of us guys here. We remember being, it's a long time ago for some of us, but we remember being 17, 18, 19, don't we?
Young people have never been old, but old people have been young.
Yes. Thanks, Brian. I'll write that down. Can't argue with that. So yeah, if the porn industry and secular society is normalizing something and you indulge in it because it's really, really hard to give up, then let me just put my theological hat on for a minute. When Adam and Eve sinned, what did they do? They rushed to God and said, "Hey, let's get together." No, they hid. They put a distance between them. When your kids did something wrong, did they come up, mum and dad? And no, they hid away, right? That's a normal response. So kids, much easier to leave the church than it is to change your porn habit.
Yeah, fair enough.
Particularly if you add VR, particularly if you add, if you add the fact that, you're already sexting and it's already personal. Oh, it's okay because, we're going out or we might go out.
Yeah, just reflecting in my day when I was probably about 21, 22, joined the Air Force, walked into the crew room. There was just the Playboy cinephiles. That was the limit of what we faced in those days.
And that's why I talk about high-speed internet porn. I saw what was happening to the brain changes as the internet rolled out. We saw where changes were happening demographically and geographically. Because remember, high-speed internet didn't roll out at the same pace everywhere. But of course, once the iPhone and streaming became ubiquitous, then it did. And it was across pretty much everywhere. So...
well, you painted a bit of a depressing picture, Tom.
Let me ask, did you get surprises?
I think I've been so busy with other things that the world passes me by in this respect, and so it's something I don't think much about.
Bronwyn, does this resonate with the younger folks? Does this resonate with you? Being issues, particularly for the younger folks you're talking to?
Yeah, that's right. Or even the children in my class, because I even had this week, I've got a year 3-4 class of refugees, and they're playing, the boys, I realise, are playing a violent game at home, just basically just shooting, killing, and I asked, who they were talking to. And they said, oh, they're friends. I said, well, can you get engaged, talk with other people? And they said, yes. And of course, they don't know these other people, right? So it's just alarm bells. I know that my kids are only young in my class, but I have to talk to them about cyber safety,
Yeah.
What I said to them was, you know, if someone says something that makes you uncomfortable, go with what you're feeling, and your feeling will be correct. You know, go with your gut, go with what your instinct says, which is, I need to get out of this situation. We need to talk to children about their nonverbal body signals that sometimes indicate to them that what they're about to do is going to put them in a vulnerable position. And I think even for mental health, it's a good avenue to talk about too, of how our body gives us signals to say that what we're about to partake in is not going to be good for us, and we need to make a good strong decision and not do it.
Yeah.
That's a pretty basic level, but I think it goes right through this type of stuff, doesn't it? Like, you get a warning in your, you know, internally that what I'm about to do might affect me long term, and this is what this talked to me about. The long-term repercussions of it can be ongoing for years. Yeah.
And the direction in which it's headed.
Yeah.
Unless we try and advocate for some cultural change and awareness, then that direction that it's getting, more violent, more pervasive, more often, more immersive, is going to continue, and there'll be more and more victims of all sorts. Demand and supply.
The 3D experience really scares me. That 3D experience really terrifies me, because once people get those goggles and becomes like standard stuff in your home, that is going to be really, really terrifying.
That's not too far away.
No.
That's not too far away at all.
But it's good to see those sites that are saying that it's not a good thing to get involved in. It has affects your mental health badly, and that's positive. The fact that
there are a lot of secular sites that are actually doing that, but beware of that $97 billion and growing, because the tobacco companies got, you know, we know how companies will fight to save their profits. Yeah,
it just feels like the law, like it's catch up all the time. Like technology's going so fast that we're about 6 months. It feels like 6 years behind what we, you know, should be putting in force. You know,
I think that quite often is the case. 6 years might be right. It might be more. And even then, I mean, deep fakes have been around for 2 years. I spoke about them on my first AI talk, and the law is not even catching up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway,
I think though in church, I think we've got to make sure that we talk about the fact that God knows our innermost thoughts, and grace, and you can never be too far. His arm can never be extended back. He's always extending his arm towards us, and we shouldn't feel that we've done something that can stop us from,
from his grace. And you're absolutely right, which is why I put the comment about the Christian faith, and Jesus Christ has resources here that are unlike anything else. And I'm going to tell this really badly, but in that video by Matt Fradd, and I didn't have a chance to look at it and get the story completely right, but essentially there was a friend of theirs got into stripping and pole dancing, and he and he called her. So no, messaged her. He got a number somehow wherever she was. I think she even moved country, and she was pole dancing and stripping each night, and he contacted her and said, "Oh, why do you want to talk to me? Convince me to come home and tell me how bad I am." And he said, "Actually, it's because we care about you, and don't like what you're doing, but we really care about you." Kept calling her over a period of time and having a relationship, and then he said, but I thought you were doing this to save money. She said, you don't understand. He said, I hate these people so much. I hate the viewers. I hate them so much that I have to drink and do alcohol. Sometimes I come home with, drugs and alcohol. And sometimes I come home with less money. So I'm actually going backwards sometimes, not forwards. And he said, what if we send you the money to come home and pay the debt for you? Didn't hear anything for a while. Eventually, she did. And they had her, she was staying in their house, and he's a Catholic. And he said, have you thought about, and she was raised Catholic as a child, right? And he said, have you thought about confession? And it's like, why would I do that? It's just going to make me feel worse, right? For some reason, somehow he got her to go to confession. So they got a priest to come around to their place rather than putting her in the box or go to church or whatever. And he said, they went down to the office at the end of the house. And I don't do this. You should watch the video because he does the story justice. I'm not doing. He said she went down. She was scared as, but somehow she still went through it, which amazed them. And he said, after about an hour, the door opened, and she skipped, not figuratively. She skipped down the hallway and had been freed of such a burden. And I thought that is such an encouraging story.
Yeah.
But I don't do the story justice. He does it really, really well. And think about what I said to my daughter-in-law in the Philippines, the mother that confessed and repented and was hugging us, the very people that were locking her up for like 27 years. And she was thanking them. Like, there are resources of the Christian faith that until we understand it or until we experience it, we're just seem like black magic or very black magic. Anyway, I just like those two stories to underscore what you're saying, Bronwyn.
Yeah, you're referring to the resources of the Christian faith. You mentioned one, which was confession. What else did you have in mind?
Forgiveness and grace. One of the things that Matt Fradd talks about is the struggle. He said, and self-esteem, it's called self-esteem, but really it's recognizing our value doesn't come from our actions. Our value comes from our relationship. That's not something that the secular world can do. Like, if you look at what's going on around now, and even prior to the riots and race and the killing of George Floyd there. I was listening to two homosexual gentlemen on a podcast say that, that what we really need in society these days is forgiveness. Where else do you go for forgiveness other than the Christian faith? Or Judaism, of course, but the Judeo-Christian faith. Where else can you get forgiveness, and where forgiveness is actually so profound?
I also kind of wonder if you've actually got something purposeful to do, and you've got a kind of a mission or role in your life, then you'll probably be less inclined to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's true too. Meaning and purpose. Absolutely, Kevin. That was the whole point of my objective morality talk, right? Is and Brian's. If there's no objective morality, then there's no meaning and purpose. But if this is actually, say, objectively wrong to abuse young children, then maybe there's a meaning and purpose in life, and discovering it actually helps you discover that relationship and your value and how valued you are as a person. And again, Bronwyn, to your point, one of the things that Matt Fradd brings out really brilliantly is that failure in the struggle doesn't need to lead to devaluation of yourself. You don't need to get into. So a lot of people who are porn addicts and heavy porn users will be. There is a link to depression, lower self-esteem. I showed you that from the Skeptics magazine,
Yeah.
right? But one of the resources of the Christian faith is that you can fail and still know you're valued. That's a big deal. That's a reason for struggling. That is a reason, that value, the reason we're valued, that is a reason to engage in the struggle. Instead of trying to normalize the behavior, forgetting about the victims, forgetting about the effect on yourself, and trying to make sure that everybody else just accepts it despite that. Because you can either make yourself feel better by not mentioning it and have everybody around you not mentioning it, or you can deal with the problem and actually seek forgiveness, and you can struggle. But the struggle is harder. The struggle's harder.
Yeah.
I hope I'm making some sense.
Bit too much, I think.
Oh, sorry, Brian.
A bit too much sense, I think.
Yeah, and I really hope that I really hope that the slide set is we'll share it, and I'm going to put a blog post with it. And Kevin, I'm sure you'll put it on the Reasonable Faith website, right? I'm hoping it becomes a resource or something you can even share as a conversation starter, guys.
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to follow up some of your links.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll pass them
Corrections
around.
and feedback appreciated, of course, as always.
Anybody else got something to contribute or ask? Right, okay. We'll start to wind up on that. So thank you very much for giving this talk, and I'll grab hold of your slides and I will post the recording on the web, of course.
I did send them to you. My laptop lost power earlier, Kel. That's what happened. I thought I'd just squeak it in, but I looked and it just all went dead just as I was sending them to you. But I've sent them now.
All my computing setup at the moment is in chaos, so I'll have to recover when I get home. But pardon me. But next week, I believe we're following a similar theme, but not exactly the same. Jeff Russell will be speaking on wild sex, which sounds a bit weird, but I believe he's actually looking at sexual behaviour in the animal kingdom and pointing out the uniqueness of the way it's expressed amongst us human beings. So beyond that, I'm not sure. So it might be a big surprise. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you very much, Tom, for doing all that research and giving a very interesting talk.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Pity about the wine, though. I can't give it to you. Yeah. All right. So thank you very much, and we'll catch up to you at the next meeting.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
See you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.